According to the official Sandbox developer website, quote, "This is our attempt to create a worthy Garry's Mod sequel. We've been playing with it for a long time. It started off on the Unreal Engine, and now it's being developed on Source 2. It's not going to be Garry's Mod 2. My hope is that this will eclipse what is possible in Garry's Mod rather than simply be a modern version of it. The current status is heavy development. The aim is to give some people access in the first half of 2021 and give everyone else access in the second half. Sandbox is currently the only piece of third-party software that is allowed to develop using all of Valve's own Source 2 tools. Hopefully, the release of Sandbox will allow for more people to get their hands on a larger set of Source 2 development tools, and we currently have a lot of information regarding the improvements over Source 1's version of Garry's Mod that can be expected in Source 2's version of Sandbox. Let's go over everything we have learned in the last couple of weeks related to Source 2, Garry's Mod, and Sandbox. Here we go. This video is sponsored by that beloved game, Raid Shadow Legends. Badass champions, millions of players, years of content, and regular updates. Raid Shadow Legends has it all. Raid actually has 16 factions to be exact. My favorite is the Nicerian Union, because there's little known about them, and they're effectively just dwarves or the Dwemer from Elder Scrolls. And I mean, who doesn't like dwarves? The fastest way to level up your champion is through farming the campaign. You'll grind XP and get loads of silver, and this month Raid actually got its biggest update ever. The main event here is the Doom Tower, a giant tower with 120 floors and a bunch of secret challenge rooms. There's really never a better time to start playing than right now. And to give some help to everybody wanting to do that tower raid, we're going to be giving away a super special champion, Bulwark. He's an awesome clan boss, and he's going to be a huge help in the tower against the bosses. If you want to get a huge head start on Raid, you're gonna have to hit the link in the description and claim your free Void Champion, an XP booster, 50 gems, energy refills, and an Ancient Shard as soon as you get in game. You can find me in game under the clan Valve News Network, and if you're quick enough, you may actually be able to join that clan. The following is an abridged paraphrase from the latest development blog from Facepunch in relation to Source 2, Source 1, Garry's Mod, and Sandbox. Shader workflow in Source 1 was a big mess, each shader having a lot of boilerplate that would need to be filled. Valve has improved this a lot in Source 2, adding a lot of near zero cost abstractions to make everyone's life easier, but it still requires a lot of meddling around with external command tools, which makes the part of the workflow feel like deja vu. We at Facepunch have most of this solved. All shader workflow is now a closed loop from creation to distribution. Save it in your editor and the changes you've previewed are instantly applied back in the game. If you are working on a new file that hasn't been compiled yet, it'll show on the shader list and compile itself when you load it for the first time. Oh yeah, Source 2 uses new shader source format. On its core, it's still HLSL code, only pre-processed into their syntax and exposing a lot of helpers. A lot of how Valve has set up their shaders reminds me how other game engines describe the idea of a base material to be expanded by their material editor, except describing such in code rather than in a node graph, which is incredibly elegant. In Source 1, all of the constraints were kind of hidden from us. The only way we could properly access them was through entities. This means that every constraint you added in Gmod was actually an entity. This time around, constraints can be added and accessed directly from the physics world. Now, there are 7 main types of constraints, but on the C# side, we can create pseudo-constraints using a base constraint type. A good example of this is making a hinge, which uses a revolver with limited default values. It's important to me that we don't make assumptions about which games will be made with Sandbox. I shouldn't hard code a Half-Life 2 style slot and bucket inventory system and expect every game to use it. So I looked at how the inventory system worked in Source 1 and broke it down into a generic system that can be easily adapted into a bunch of different scenarios. In Gmod, the weapon system was based on the C-base entity in the game engine. In Sandbox, we don't even use the native class. In Sandbox, a weapon is just an entity with a bunch of interfaces implemented. The weapon system is actually stupidly simple. It's based on the active entity system. For view models, I've really struggled. It seems overly complicated to me that the view models are server-side, and they always exist. So we're changing the model when we change guns, but they're predicted and only ever seen by us. After a few days of trying to make it make sense, I totally made them client-side. My reasoning is that they should behave like a HUD. This has made things a billion times simpler. And although there are things I know we'll have to work around, it works exactly how I'd expect it to. There's nothing magic or hidden about base view model. It exists in add-on code. The property enable view model rendering can be set get on any model, and it basically marks it as a view model, which means it'll only render if you're in first person and looking through one of its parents. Now, remember the blog where I talked about how great Panorama was and how much I loved it? Well, this month I ripped out Panorama and replaced it with a homebrew solution written in C#. Why did I do this? I know myself. I know that I would have eventually done this. It's easier and better to rewrite it in C# than to fix the stuff up that annoys me in C++. So what's changed? Panorama has a non-standard layout system, which is kind of flexy, but it's not as powerful or complete as proper flexboxing. Anyone that asks for grid support can get fucked, in my opinion. We can add special magic to the sheets, like sounds and different rendering modes, but generally, if you plan on using plain CSS, it should work like you expect. So a lot of pretty low-level foundation has been completed through December of 2020 for Sandbox and Source 2. I'm really happy with our velocity. It feels like every stride forward we make also increases our speed by 20%. Everything we implement makes implementing a bunch of other stuff a million times easier. My primary goal over the next few months is to get it playable. Well, it's playable right now, but there's some real rough edges that I want to round out. Once it's playable by us internally, we will evaluate whether it's worth starting to give access out to some of you guys watching, end quote. Sandbox is not Garry's Mod 2. It's supposed to be the next evolution of what a Garry's Mod type sandbox game can be done in a new next generation engine from the creators of the original. Source 2, regardless of its rough around the edges state due to it being entirely an in-development engine at an internal company, is still something that us as a community will get a much larger look at once Sandbox is out and available to the public. It's unknown how Garry is going to be picking people to get access to Sandbox through the first quarter of 2021, at least currently. However, depending on who ends up getting it, the data mining possibilities of baseline engine limitations and goals and features is hugely important to me. And not only that, but rumors and talks about Valve being a little more hands-on with this project compared to Garry's Mod are making rounds in the infosphere. That said, Valve should totally support this project. It's doing more work to get its engine workable to the public than Valve has done in the last decade. And seeing the current state of the Half-Life Alyx development tools, which many in the Sandbox community are using to get used to the tools to then develop content for Sandbox, are far more rough around the edges than anything we're going to be seeing from Sandbox when it is in a quote-unquote playable state available to the public. Valve is not working on their engine in the ways that they promised us 5 years ago, and they likely never will. So whatever Garry Newman and Facepunch end up doing in the future is hugely important to the Valve development community, both inside and outside of the Sandbox ecosystem. So if you want to keep up with everything Sandbox, Source 2, and Facepunch related that I can get my hands on, follow me on Twitter, follow my Discord server, and check out my Patreon page to watch these videos early and get your name in the credits, all down in the description below. Or hey, if you want to support me, check out my merch. We're currently selling some ugly Christmas sweaters and t-shirts, as well as some missing textured socks that are only available until January 1st. Anyways, thank you very much for watching. I'm Tyler McVicker. This is Valve News Network. Have a good day. Adios.